So, hey there, everybody, and welcome to the cataloging talk panel presentation explanation. My birth name is Catherine, but I go by Katie. So feel free to call me either, whichever I go by whichever name there is not currently one of already in the building or the classroom. So at the moment, it is Katie. Oh, and of course now there we go. I'm cataloging the librarian, not the best at PowerPoint librarian. So apologies if there are points where I look at this going, why aren't you doing the right way? So yes, that's me. Hello, I'm Katie. I am the current digital documents coordinator at the Mississippi Library Commission, but I also catalog incoming books, kits, and state docs. So I got my job because we had a cataloger and then that cataloger left. And so I was the temporary cataloger. And then we got a replacement cataloger and then the replacement cataloger left. And so I was the temporary cataloger again. And at that point, I just said to my boss, like, look, let's just have me be the real cataloger. I know what I'm doing. I've done this temporary job twice now. So if you have been thrown into the cataloging position at your local library, like that's me. Guess what? It happens to a lot of us. But I found that I've really enjoyed cataloging and have really taken to it very well, and then am now giving a presentation on it. So the first thing is just, what's the deal about cataloging in the first place? Just a basic rundown of what is cataloging. So if you ask 5 different people, you'll get five different definitions. But for the purpose of this presentation, cataloging is the process of creating a library system or like an organized system or an organized list, an organized database, etc., where one can easily look up books, find their location, and learn basic information about the books. And it's not even books. It could also be like DVDs, media, kits, odd 3-dimensional items. It is just an organized system where you can look up where the thing lives and find out more information about the thing. And we need cataloging because a good catalog is beneficial for the librarian as well as the patron. Obviously, there's the first big obvious point about where the heck are we going to find this thing. But if you have a really well-curated catalog and a really detailed catalog, you could also use it for things like reader's advisory or research. It's one of the good things about our library catalogs that they will usually have like a description of the book or a subject term telling you what the book is about. And so if you are running low on time and have to very quickly do a reader's advisory, just a quick search of something like that in your cataloging system could help provide some results. So here are some basic cataloging terms you might need to know because I'll be mentioning them in the demonstration. So the first is OCLC Connection Client. That is the name of the cataloging program that I use at MLC and that also y'all can use if you wish, because your library has a subscription to Connection Client. Email us for the login info if you don't know the login info off the top of your head. The login it's like a 10-digit number that is not very easy to memorize. So I have mine taped to the wall behind me so that I can look at it and remember what the 10-digit number is. So Connection Client has a desktop application as well as a website browser. I'm going to be showing off both at the end during the cataloging demonstration. You can use both of them. They both do the same thing. It is just which one do you prefer most? I will admit I prefer the desktop application because with that one, if our internet goes down, I can at least save my progress. And so with Connection Client, it connects with WorldCat as well as other various OCLC libraries. So for instance, if you have a book that has been so we occasionally have this problem on MLC where we have a book that's been weeded but it hasn't been deleted from like WorldCat and from like our ILL holdings. And you can access that and delete that book from Connection Client. So when you do Connection Client, there is options to update whatever book you're cataloging to WorldCat and to OCLC holdings, which is very nice. The next thing that you will need to know is MARC standards. So MARC stands for Machine Readable Cataloging Standards. And that is just basically the language of cataloging records. So if you hear someone talking about like, oh, a MARC field or a MARC record or something like that, that is basically what you see in a catalog entry. If you look up a book in your library's catalog, the thing where it says title, author, contents, subject headings, the language that tells the library system what goes where, that's MARC. So OCLC connection client, it exports the catalog records as MARC data, which, like I said, is used by our library system to house the catalogs. And with the library system, that would be something like Verso or Autographics or whatever web program that you'll use that actually people can go to look up your catalog online. All right, come on, next slide. All right, so cataloging standards. There are two that you'll often hear about, AACR2, which is the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, second edition, and RDA, which stands for Research, Description, and Access. You should be hearing more about RDA than AACR2 because nobody really uses AACR2 anymore. It is no longer being maintained or being updated. And so with this cataloging standards, with like RDA and AACR2, MARC is just the language to relay the information. It's the cataloging standards that tell you how you should relay the information in the first place. And I have a lovely example because I know that does not make sense with me just saying it like that. So we have this book right here, Dragons Love Tacos. So with this book, RDA would basically be the language that says, hey gang, when you're cataloging a book that has an added author, illustrator, etc., aside from the main author, make sure to write their title out fully. Don't abbreviate like ED period or ILUS period. So RDA is basically the rules of how we are going to put something in the catalog. And then MARC takes those rules and takes that information and goes, okay, here is how I am going to interpret it so that our catalog system, so that Verso will be able to read it and display it properly. And I know that that 700 hashtag one thing looks weird. We will explain that later because we might actually explain that on the next slide actually. But yes, that 700 hashtag one weird little symbol, A, Salmieri Daniel, that is the MARC data that is going to be up in the catalog entry. One more thing before we get to that, before we get to more MARC fields specifically, original cataloging versus copy cataloging. So with original cataloging, that is creating a catalog entry entirely from scratch. So if you've ever taken a cataloging class at a library school, this is probably what a lot of your assignments were. That is, with original cataloging, you get a book or an item or a cool rock, and someone says, hey, make an entry out of this. And then you used your best judgment as a librarian to write out, to decide what information you were going to put about the book or the item or the cool rock so that other people will be able to find what you are talking about. There's also copy cataloging. Copy cataloging is taking an already existing catalog entry and modifying it so that it can best serve your institution. If you are cataloging a book that has been mass produced by a major publisher and has been out for longer than a month, there is a 95% chance you are going to be copy cataloging that book. That is great. Copy cataloging is a bajillion times easier than original cataloging. It is a lot less work. It's also what we're mostly going to focus on in the presentation. I will talk a bit about original cataloging later, and if people super want it to, I can do a little bit of a display about how to, not display, I can do a little bit of a demonstration about how to get started on original cataloging. Because with original cataloging, that would be for more of like a self-published book or a book that has had a very limited print run that you can't find much of information about it anymore. Or, like I said, that really cool rock. So like some of the things that I've had to original catalog are story walk kits, puppet kits, things like that. But even with some things like that, there are still some tips and tricks so you're not going in completely blind, which is always good because original cataloging is fun, but it involves a lot of you trying to look up that book, trying to find the slightest bit of publisher information about that book, because like, what do you mean this publisher doesn't have a website? I need to know where the dang publisher is located. How can I do that? And then you pull your hair out and get a Diet Coke at lunch because you deserve it. So now we're getting into the nitty gritty of what a catalog entry actually consists of. All right, I will definitely start to do an example of, I can see the chat as well, and I will do a bit of an example of original cataloging at the end because I pulled a book that is perfect for original cataloging. So a catalog entry consists of 3 different things. There's the field, there's the indicator, and there's the subfield. The field tells you what larger concept this line of data will tell us, like the title, the author, or the subject heading, an added author, the table of contents of a book, things like that. The indicator tells you that there's something a little weird about this line of data. Pay attention. So the indicator are 2 little numbers. The field is 3 numbers, and the indicator are the 2 little numbers that hang out next to the field. I will have a visual demonstration of this after this slide. Don't worry about it. I am also a visual learner, so there's a lot of screen caps in here of actual catalog entries. But the indicator tells you, hey, there's something weird about this field. You should pay attention. Like, for example, a book could start with a word that you don't catalog, like a or the. The author could only go by one name, like Madonna or Cher, or subject headings used are specifically Library of Congress subject headings. And so the subfield tells you how this larger concept of the field specifically relates to the one thing that we are cataloging: the actual title of a book, the actual author of a book, the actual subject headings of a book, where a book is published, things like that. So like The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up as a title, John Grisham as an author, or young adult fiction as a subject heading. So come on, there we go. Here is an example of what a sample field looks like. So we've got that 245 right there, and that is the field. All of your fields will be 3-digit numbers. But don't worry. I know if you're thinking like, girl, there could be like 999 different numbers. Don't worry. You pretty much, there's a lot less than that. There's basically like a couple of 100 ranges of numbers that only have like 1 or 2 actual fields in there. And you don't have to memorize all the fields. Nobody memorizes all the fields. There's like 4 that you will need to memorize to make cataloging easier. But if there's something going on weird with your catalog entry and you look at it and you're like, I don't know what the heck this 776 field is, that's cool. Nobody does. What you do is you go to an OCLC website, which I will link later and mention later, a little bit of foreshadowing. And then you look up what the heck that 776 field is. So you can see, okay, that's like a link to a URL of where you can purchase the book. So then 245 would be a field. This 1 and this 0 are the indicators. And so for this right here, this would tell us, hey, there's something special about this subfield. Although really the 1 and 0 for these indicators just basically tell us, hey, there aren't any words in front of the subfield, the title of the book, Midnight in Chernobyl. So with the subfield is divided up into different, not entirely subfields, but you see that weird little guy right there where it looks like a line and then there's a equal sign underneath it. So that tells us different things about the subfield. So for instance, 245 is the title. And so this is the whole title of the book, Midnight in Chernobyl, The Untold Story of the World's Greatest Nuclear Disaster, Adam Higginbotham. That's the full title of the book that you got from the front of the book. But the little B, The Untold Story of the World's Greatest Nuclear Disaster, that thing tells you that this is the subtitle of the book or like a parenthetical title of the book. And that little C, Adam Higginbotham, that tells you, okay, that is the author of the book. So the whole thing is the title of the book. It's just broken up into smaller little chunks. And so with cataloging, here's a sample field. And then when you add a whole bunch of sample fields together, you get a full catalog entry. And this is the thing that scares people, because that cataloging entry looks terrifying. There are all those numbers. You don't know what that means. What is going on? This thing is like a whole page. I don't know what, this is blowing my brain. This is the thing that scares people, but you don't need to worry about that, because just think of it as like a jigsaw puzzle, or like a small, like a jigsaw puzzle or something like that, because it's a big thing, but it's composed of a bunch of tiny different things. So don't worry. When they're copy cataloging, there are really only 4 fields or numbers plus one group of 3. That's its own weird thing that you absolutely 100% should pay attention to in order to make sure you're copy cataloging the right book. Because 9 times out of 10, when you're copy cataloging something, like if you're looking up the newest Nora Roberts for your library collection, 9 times out of 10, when you look it up in Connection Client, there'll be like 200 other libraries who have also cataloged that book and are using the same cataloging entry. And so you will already have a super nice, super big, super robust cataloging entry that you can draw from. But you still need to double check the 4 field numbers plus that one weird group of 3 to make sure that you don't do something like accidentally pull up a catalog entry for an older edition of the book or a audio book version of the book. So the 4 fields and numbers that you super need to pay attention to are 245, which is the title, 250, which is the edition, 264, which is the publication info, and 300, which is the description. So you also need to pay attention to the 336, the 337, and the 338 fields, but you can treat those as one entity. And 9 times out of 10, you're not going to end up touching the 336, 337, and 338. Those are ones that you just have to check to make sure that they look like how they should look like. So the 245 field, that's the title of the book. Does it match what's on the cover of the book? Does the book have a subheading? Is the book's author's name on the front of the book? So there's our good buddy Midnight in Chernobyl again, as providing an example of what the title field for a book would look like. There's 250. That's the edition of the book. So the edition is especially useful for things like technology manuals, law codes, dictionaries, reference materials, user guides, or any other book that would update regularly. So this entry I yoinked off of the Midnight in Chernobyl main catalog entry, and that would tell us that, okay, this copy of the book we have is the first Simon & Schuster hardcover edition. 264 is the publication info. Where was the book published? What year was the book published? Occasionally, there might be 2 or more 264 fields, and that's totally normal. There are a lot of fields that you can actually double up on. And 264, double up or triple up or quadruple up, and 264 is one of them. So if you check the indicators, which right here, that little blank and then the 1, and then the blank and then the 4, you'll see that they're most likely different. 264 can display the publication info, but it also can display the copyright date, manufacturer info, distribution info, etc. So for example, 264, no indicator, and then indicator 1 is the publication info for where the book was published. So Midnight in Chernobyl, it was published in New York, in London, in Toronto, in Sydney, in New Delhi, and it was published by Simon & Schuster, and it was published in the year 2019. 264, the second entry, the 264 no indicator, indicator 4, that indicator 4 tells you that, hey, this 264 is going to be talking about the copyright dates. And that's why you got to pay attention to your indicators, because occasionally you'll have fields, especially like if you get into the subject headings and things that people can add on later, where they will tell you something specific about your catalog entry. With this, that something specific is, hey, this book was copyright in 2019. The last thing that you got to pay attention to, no matter what, whenever you're copy cataloging, is the physical description. How many pages does the book have? Does it have an index? Does it have color photographs or illustrations? Check it with the physical copy of the book to make sure everything matches. And again, if you're copy cataloging something, 9 times out of 10, you will have this information there already. And 9 times out of 10, it will already be correct. This is just for that 1 time out of 10, where if you're copy cataloging something and then you go through and it's like, wait a moment, for some reason, this is pulling up the entry of the 8th edition of Legal Codes for Dummies instead of the 10th edition, which is what we have at our library. I should not catalog that. So this one little weird group, the 336, the 337, and the 338s, this is RDA again. And if you Google RDA, everything will look intensely terrifying. But the good thing about being a cataloging librarian is RDA is somebody else's problem. That is because RDA is developed and agreed upon, and the standards are set by the American Library Association and by other library associations. You're not going to be working with RDA itself that often. What you're going to be working with is MARC, which are the specific rules and interpretations of RDA that our library's system, like Verso or wherever we host our catalog, will read. So if you Google RDA and you look at RDA and you want to learn more information and your brain just starts leaking out of your ears, like, that's cool, take a little break, back off, because RDA is a lot, and it's a lot that you might not need. But so with this fields, RDA tells you that the 336, 337, 338, that will tell you if your book is a physical book and not, or an ebook or a DVD or audiobook or a CD-ROM, etc. And good news, when you're copy cataloging, you don't have to touch this. You don't have to make any changes. You just have to make sure it matches the item's format. And these will look very weird because, come on, click over. Here's what the fields look like. They look very weird. Yeah. But the good thing about that, 9 times out of 10, you just scroll down to the RDA for like those fields for physical book and go, okay, that looks weird, but it is the weird that it's supposed to look like. And there are websites where you can pull up and look and see what, like when you're doing original cataloging, what the heck you would put in there in the first place. I'm going to show you my best friend website after we get through this presentation. OCLC has this amazing website where they have all of the fields linked out and all of the information about how you're supposed to write out things and how a catalog entry is supposed to look. So if your librarian says, hey, guess what? You get to catalog this really cool rock, you will know how to fill out the 336, 337, and 338 fields for the really cool rock after you go to that website and look it up. Because like, I don't know this off the top of my head. Nobody knows all of this stuff off the top of their head. The human brain can only hold so much. And for me, it holds these fields that I use most often. Unsurprisingly, libraries don't catalog cool rocks on a regular basis. So for those of you who are nerdy about this kind of thing, like I am, 336, that field, it describes the content. So what is this item composed of? Text, images, spoken word audio, music. 337 describes the media, which basically means, do I have to use anything special to view the content? Like a computer, an audio player, just my eyeballs. 338 describes the carrier. How is the content delivered to the viewer? Is it through a volume of text, an online resource, an audio cassette? So we are going to take my water bottle for a moment, and not just because I need to very quickly take a sip of water. So for my water bottle, which I don't know if you can see or not, I hope you can. It's a very lovely water bottle. 336 would tell us, okay, this is a three-dimensional object. 337 would tell us you don't have to use anything special to view the water bottle. You can just look at it with your eyeballs. And 338 would tell us this water bottle is an object by itself. You do not have to use anything special to view or access the water bottle. You can just look at the water bottle. I'm glad that other people like cool rocks as well. I'm a sucker for a good rock. Like if you take me to a rock shop, I will be in there for ages. It's bad. So now it's time to copy catalog, as you can see, by a cat who is cataloging. I love the absolutely no sitting on table sign that you can see like just at the right of the image. It's like it's a cat. The cat's not going to follow your rules. You can't ever get a cat to do anything. It's going to sit on that table. So I'll do a live demonstration after we go through some steps on the PowerPoint. And so the steps that I'm showing in this PowerPoint, the screen caps that I have are from the computer program, not the browser version. Because again, I'm going to share both later, but I like the computer program a lot more, and I'm in charge of this presentation. So we have a book. Step 1, find the book. You can do it by either scanning the ISBN on the back of the book or going to cataloging, search WorldCat, and entering the book's title, author, etc. And you can see my little screen cap. That's where you scan the ISBN. I edited that on MS Paint. So step 2 is you pick what entry you want. When you scan in the ISBN or look up the book, it'll pull up a lot of entries. Make sure that you are picking something with the right cataloging language, which is that CAT-L that you can see on the far right of the screen cap. You'll want ENG, which means that your catalog entry is in English. It's not going to do you any good if your main catalog entries are in English, but you catalog a book and your catalog entry is all in Danish. I don't know what the Danish word for contains color illustrations is, and neither will your patrons. So, and with this, on the browser app, on the browser, it is a lot easier to look between different catalog entries, because the thing about this, it pulls up 7 different catalog entries that match for this ISBN. Okay, we can automatically knock out 2 of them, 4 and 5, because they are in French and Danish. If we had the book in our hands and see that it wasn't published by Perfect Bound, then we can knock out 1. That would still leave 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And I guarantee you at least one of those is going to be an audiobook. And another one is going to be an ebook. So as I will demonstrate later with the browser, it's a lot easier to click in between catalog entries at the browser to find the entry that best fits what you are cataloging. It's the one thing that I don't like about the computer app is you will have to click one of these in the desktop program, look at it, go, oh, okay, I see from that 336, 337, and 338 that this is an online resource. That means it's an ebook. That means it's not applicable to me. And then X out and then click another entry. So then we get to step 3. Is everything there? So for example, with this book, Avalon High is a Meg Cabot children's book that I read when I was in middle school. So you need to quickly check the fields of the record to make sure that they match the book itself. You might need to flip through the book to check the number of pages, types of illustrations, edition of the book, etc. And then when we get to step 3B, hey, what if something's weird? So depending on the cataloging entry, you might need to change something. There might be incorrect author names, outdated or offensive subject headings, or incorrect terminology in the catalog entry. So for example, occasionally, if I pull up a copy cataloged record of a book, sometimes there will randomly be subject headings in German. I do not know how they got there. I don't know what they're doing, but I know that they're not going to be any use to our patrons and our system because we do not have a large German-speaking population at MLC. So with that, I delete those because the goal of the catalog is you want to make things helpful and make things useful for yourself and for your patrons. And sometimes that involves deleting wrong or extraneous information. Likewise, your library might have a special rule or special section the book goes into that you might have to add to the entry. Like this, and for that, the 690 field and the 696 fields can be used to help indicate these specific collections. There also might just be something cool about the book itself. Like it might be signed, it might be like have a neat sticker inside of it. It might be something bad about the book itself, it might have a sticker there that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. And so those sort of things would be marked in the catalog entry and just kind of go in the field for general notes. And here's an example of 3 different books that have 3 different special things that you have to do with them for the Mississippi libraries, or at least for us, for MLC, because starting at the left, Angie Thomas. At MLC, we have a rule that if there's a book by a Mississippi author, it gets 2 additional subject headings for our Mississippi collection. All books that are written by Mississippi authors get a Mississippi author subject field, as well as a Mississippiana subject field. So for example, if I were cataloging The Hate You Give, I would put that information in there myself because it is applicable to my collection. Middle book cover, Hurricane Child. While looking up information about this book, I see, oh, wait a moment, the author changed their name. The book cover says Karen Calendar, but now the author goes by Kaysen Calendar, and they've published multiple new books and more things under their name, Kaysen Calendar. Go read Cemetery Boys, their newest. If you haven't, it's really good. And so for that, because the catalog entry is designed to help patrons and navigate and find books, I would change the author's name in the catalog entry to Kaysen Calendar, because that way, not only am I respecting the author's wishes by going by their new preferred name, but I'm also just making it easier, because if someone reads Cemetery Boys, Kaysen Calendar's newest, and clicks on it, then that will pull up the work that they have published under a previous name. Also, this could be useful if you have an author who goes by like multiple names or has multiple pseudonyms. I know the author Shannon McGuire publishes under like 5 different names. And so with something like that, you could put her aliases in like an added author field so that if someone looks up Shannon McGuire, then they could see, oh, okay, it's like, this is also Mira Grant. This is also, I forget what other name she has, but she's got like 10 bajillion author names. This woman knows the value of a good pseudonym. And so finally, our last example, this is a signed edition of A Memory of Light. And that's a cool thing to note. And so that's something that you would put in the general field. You would put something like copy signed by Robert Jordan. We have a couple of books in our collection that have been like donated by authors or have signed by authors or things like that. And those cool things like that would go hang out in the field. And also Cemetery Boys is apparently Ada Thomas, not Kaysen Calendar. Wow, I am the world's worst at young adult books. Felix Ever After is Kaysen Calendar. That is also good. I liked both of them. I confused them because they're both very good books. And because my brain has been nothing but cataloging for the past week and a half. So going back, we have step 4. After we've looked over our entry, after we've made sure that everything fits, after we've made sure that everything works, we validate it. And validate just basically tells you if there are any problems with the record. And if there aren't, the validate field at the bottom of the screen will swap to validate -c. That means, I assume that means validate correct, because the alternative is validate -f, which I know means validate fail. So hold up a moment, something weird happened when we validated. Occasionally, when you validate your entry, you'll get an error message. So when that happens, look up the specific field that's having the error message and give it a once over. 9 times out of 10, you can delete the field and it will solve the problem. Only a few specific fields are actually required for the catalog entry. And if you're like cataloging your 20th book of the day and you don't really want to deal with trying to piece out what the heck is wrong with this one field, and the catalog entry already has enough information that it is useful, you judge it useful for you and for your patrons, you can delete that sucker if needed. So the OCLC website, which oclc.org/bibformats/en.html, which I will show later and then also drop it in the chat later, that lists what every field means and if the fields are required or not. If you do a lot of cataloging, bookmark it because it will be your best friend. It is my best friend. So for example, with this error message, okay, hold on a second, something weird happened. That means 038 occurrence 1, indicator 2, invalid code. That means that whatever the indicator 2 is for this 083 field, it's wrong. You can change it yourself and fix it yourself, or go into the OCLC website, looking at the 083 field, that field is added Dewey number. Do we need it? We might not need it. You might be able to delete it and save yourself some time and a headache. So 5 and 6 are on the same page because they are kind of the very similar, very small steps. Step 5, update holdings. That will put the record into WorldCat so it can be checked out for ILL, and so that people who use WorldCat can see the record. And this happens pretty quickly. We have Betty, who is in charge of our ILL and things like that at MLC, has come to me a couple of times going, hey, this book is newly cataloged. I can't find it. And I'll go, that's because I still haven't wrapped and stamped it yet, Betty. I literally just cataloged it 2 hours ago. So when it updates holdings very quickly. Step 6 is export. This will export your catalog entry to a file that you can upload to your integrated library system. So for MLCs, it requires that you export the catalog entry to a DAT file. Connection Client can do that. This is your first time, you have to set up a specific pathway so the file knows where to export. And I can show you that in the program. So question time. We will do the live demonstration next after I take a little sip of water, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat or unmute and ask some questions. Or if you want, email me at gill@mlca.lib.ms.us to ask something privately, or like if you've got a question that you thought of in the shower 5 hours later, because that's me, that's what I do. Pull up the chat.
There's no questions in the chat right now, Katie.
Cool beans. So I will stop share. Oh,
you did get a question. Is there any time where using AA standards are required?
So I'm not entirely sure what AA standards are. Let me quickly do a Google for that. Date of publication. So yeah, so with that, that would be something like the date of publication or things like that. That would be going in the like 264 field. And that would be useful for just getting more information about the book. So another thing is, but again, some of that might depend on your local library itself. Like for example, there was a question emailed earlier about like, what's the best classification to use? Like should I use Dewey? Should I use Cutter for last name? And so with that is just basically what fits best for your local library. Like for example, if your local library, if you find Dewey fits best, if you're new Dewey, if your patrons know Dewey, if people are able to find books by using Dewey, if that works for you, then awesome. But if you find that like if patrons are able to find books better if you like catalog by author's last name, or especially for little ones like kids, if you do author's last name or even catalog by title, then that's what you should do. There is no one size fits all for how what the call number of the book is going to be. With that, it works for the library. And so Carrie, looking back at the question, if the item was published for RDA standards became a thing. So generally, if you are If you're copy cataloging that, then it will generally show regular RDA standards in whatever entry you are pulling up. Because, for example, one of the books that I've pulled to show off for demonstration was published before RDA standards. And so when I will show it up for the cataloging, because people have cataloged it later with RDA, and because the things have shifted to RDA, it'll automatically pull up with RDA standards. If you're doing original cataloging, then you should definitely use the RDA standards. So basically, you don't need AACR2. It's just mentioned in there because, especially if you read like the history of cataloging or cataloging 101 or things like that, it will mention that. And so when it mentions that, then it's like people will be like, what the heck is that? And that's what the heck it is. Something that we used for a bit and then don't really use anymore. So, okay, let me share, just minimize this for a moment so I can share the screen, the whole screen, so that I can pull up, do a live demonstration for cataloging. Ooh. So the first thing we're going to do is do a very basic copy cataloging entry, which this is going to be your Nora Roberts. This is going to be your James Patterson. This is going to be your like big popular fiction. So I'm going to pull up Connection Client. It's going to load up. I'm going to log on. It gives you a lovely little message. It says Tornaya because she's who the software is registered under. And so, for example, I have a book here that I pulled from my personal library because I knew it would fit our cataloging demonstration. Madhouse at the End of the Earth, the Belgica's Journey into the Dark Antarctic Night by Julian Sankton, because I love me a good polar expedition book. So for this, I'm going to scan in the ISBN and it pulls up multiple entries. And so with this, you can see that, for example, entry number 2, it has 542 holdings. That means that 542 different libraries use this catalog entry. Entry number 3, it has 73 holdings, but also, if you can see on the second line, first and second line, it says one online resource, and it also says electronic. So those are signs just right off the bat that, okay, record number 3 is going to be for the ebook version. And since I'm cataloging the physical book version, I'm not going to do that. And so if it's between record number 1 and record number 2, I'm going to choose number 2 because it has the most holdings, and therefore it'll probably be more robust than record number 1. And so when I click on record number 2, it thinks for a bit, and then it pulls up a cataloging entry. All right, so I'm going to quickly take a look at the book. The cover, Madhouse at the End of the Earth, the Belgica's Journey, etc., by Julian Sankton. Yeah, that matches the 246 field. I'm going to go ahead and flip to the first page. Oh, I got a signed copy. I just forgot about that. I haven't read this book yet. So I'm going to flip to the copyright information page because that will tell you the edition as well as where the book was published. Okay, so this says that it is the first hardcover edition on here. Look down, first edition. Okay, that tracks. I'm going to edit in hardcover for first edition, but also up on the 20 fields, that also says hardcover up there because the 20 fields are the ISBN, and that will tell you what make the book is for the ISBN. So this is more added bonus cataloging stuff. All right, so the 264 fields, the 264 field, that tells us this book was published in New York, yeah, by Crown Publishing, yeah, in 2021, yes. And I can, if you see the little brackets, that means best guess. So since I'm looking at the book itself, I can see that it was in 2021, so I can delete those little brackets. Sometimes catalog entries are based off of information. Sometimes books don't entirely have all the information. Like if you have gotten a just published book or a small press book or a book that was self-published, sometimes it might not say when the book was published or where the book was published. And so you put your little best guess, then you do the little brackets to see that, okay, this is our best guess. And then the 300 fields, that VII tells you that there are, that's the not necessarily in essential pages, that's the unnumbered pages, that little VII. So it'd be 8 unnumbered pages. Yeah, as you can tell. And then there's also 350 pages, 350 numbered pages. So I'm going to flip to the back of the book and do a quick double check right there. Yeah, 650 numbered pages, 16 unnumbered pages of plates. I am assuming that that means plate illustrations and not cool, like actual dinner plates. So I'm going to flip through the book. And yes, there are plate illustrations in the book right here. I will count those pages to make sure that there are 16, which, yeah, there are. Okay, then there's illustrations and maps, which I could tell from the the 16 unnumbered pages of plates that there are. And the book is 25 centimeters. And honestly, real talk, leveling with you here, 9 times out of 10, the measurement for the book is going to be right. You do not need to measure the book. It's only if you have like a book that's weirdly sized or a bonkers number in there that you're going to be like, hold on a moment, let me check, because cataloging is streamlined and some things, it's very much time and effort to measure a book. And so, all right, I'm going to double check the 336, 337, 338. I know that that field means, okay, this tells me that this is a physical dead tree book. And since I just noticed that my book was signed by the author, because I haven't read it yet, this is next on my to read list, I'm going to do what I mentioned earlier and just add a general note here. 500 field is just general notes, signed by author. And so I'm going to scroll down, see if there's anything I need to delete. For example, if there was a random subject field in German or there was something else, and they'll see we don't have to keep the information for the online version on catalog entries that are for the dead tree paper version. That's an in-house rule. So I can delete that. With deleting, you just hit Alt Delete, and that will delete the entry. And if you want to make a new catalog entry, like I did for the signed by author, you just click on catalog entry and then click enter, and it brings up a new entry for a new field. All right, now I'm going to validate this to make sure that everything goes good. Okay, edit, validate, it spins. Then down here at the bottom, if I had a little laser pointer, I would be highlighting this little guy with the laser pointer. It says validate C. Cool. That means that everything in here looks great. Then I will do action, holdings, update holdings. Awesome. Cool. That means that if someone wanted to check this book out via interlibrary loan, they can check this book out. And I already told our interlibrary loans lady not to let anyone check this book out because it's technically not ours. And then action export. Come on. And it says that the DAT file already exists. Do I want to override it, append to it, or cancel output? And I want to override it because that has all of the previous information from last time's cataloging session on there. So I'm going to overwrite that. And then you can print labels in both Connection Client as well as in the browser program and the desktop program. So with that, it'll be tools, options, I believe. Yeah, and then you can go for printing to go to where the printer is, fonts for where you want things to be displayed, label printing, fonts for labels. There's a lot of things that you can play around and poke around. Okay, I see a question from Miranda. If you have two copies of the same book, do you have to do two separate entries in OCLC connection clients, or is there a shortcut? You do not have to do two separate entries. So I'm speaking just for the Library Commission. That's something that you would do in the library program and blah, 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 blah. That's something you would do in whatever your library system is, like Verso. So for example, with Verso, you can add on multiple items to whatever the library entry is. And with that is another way of having two books essentially share the same entry. You can do that with like serials as well, or like if it's books in a series, you would probably want them to have two different separate entries. And if it's different types of book, like large print and regular print, large print and standard print, then you definitely would want them to have two separate entries as well. But if you have like two identical copies of like Madhouse at the End of the Earth, you don't have to catalog it twice. You can just add another item when Verso itself. I know some other libraries don't use Verso for their ILS, so I cannot speak to that specifically. But if you don't use Verso, that's an email your service provider question. So next up, I'm going to show how the website browser works, because that is another way that you can catalog. So with that is connection. It's spelled dumb. It's connexion.oclc.org. So I'm going to do that. Start the new session. I'm going to log into that one. Okay. And so when you log into the web browser, it pulls up this tiny little window that I'm trying to drag over here so that it can hang out in the center of things, but it's not really wanting to drag very well. Well, I keep on maximizing the tiny little window because it's not wanting to let me drag it. But it's a tiny little window that just basically tells OCLC, hey, someone's logged onto the website. If you kill that little tiny window, then it will log you off of connection, which is not very useful. So for book number 2, we're going to catalog another favorite of mine, one that I've actually read this time, Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. So for copy cataloging, I'm going to go cataloging search, and that searches through WorldCat. And I'm just going to start things off easy. I'm just going to search via ISBN, and it will spin for a little bit while it searches. Okay, and it's pulled up multiple entries with this. So again, it's the same thing that we did for the Madhouse. I'm looking at the book. Okay, this edition was published in 2001, and this edition was published by Green Willow Books. So for example, I can already rule out number 14 because that's for recording for the blind and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so an interesting thing that you might see is if you see two dates smushed together like this, that could be if there are two dates associated with the book. So for example, Howl's Moving Castle, this edition was published in 2001, but the first edition, was published in 1986. It's just that this is the first Harper Trophy edition published in 2001. So I'm going to try entry number 10 first, because that seems like it might fit. I'm going to click on it. Okay. All right. I'm going to scroll down entry number 10. I can already see that there are a couple of fields in here that I might want to get rid of, because I don't know what paw print's binding is, but it's certainly not what this book is bound in. So I'm going to scroll down. This might work, but there are some other options. And so the fun thing about the browser is that I don't have to go back to the main entry. I can just click this little arrow right here and it'll pull up a different option. This one is probably not going to be any good because one, there's not that much information. Two, it's got some typos in the summary, so I'm probably not going to go for that one. See what this one is. This one actually might be good. Let me scroll down to see. Okay, text unmediated volume. That tells me that this is good for a book, a dead tree book. It has a lot of useful information that tells me, so the 650 is the subject fields, which tells me, okay, this is a fantasy. This is a fiction about witches. This is fantasy that's juvenile fiction. So this one looks like it might be good. So with this catalog entry on the web browser, I'm looking through this. I don't think I have to change anything here. It has Greenwellow Books 2001 to 250. I'm checking is the, yeah. Although this is a 260 instead of a 264, that's interesting. I don't know what the 260 field is off the top of my head. I'm going to go to the oclc.org Bibliographic Formats and Standards website, which is my best friend. If you're a copy cataloger, this will also be your best friend. Okay, so I'm looking down. 260 is publication, distribution, etc. for an imprint. Okay, I'm looking back at the front of the page. Greenwellow Books is an imprint of HarperCollins. So in this case, the 260 is kind of the right field. Maximize my window, will do. There we go. And so with this, it is looking like everything is going good. And so I'm going to go to action. I believe it's action. Like I said, I don't use the web browser all that often. It's an edit, not action first. I'm going to go edit, validate record. Record validated. We have no problems. And now I know this one is under action. It's action, update holdings. You're about to set holdings for this record. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. Holdings updated. You can find this in interlibrary loans now if you wish. And then action, export record and MARC. Export, that will pull me so that I can download the MARC file later and then upload it to our library system. So the reason why I don't like the web browser all that much is because you have to download the individual files download the individual records into a DAT file, whereas with the computer version, it just does that automatically. So with this, in order to get the file that you have to upload to your Verso, to your system, you go over to General, Admin Options, Download Export Files. And then, okay, it says that there is a file that was created today that's in MARC. It's about 226 bytes. It's not downloaded. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to download it. And then it says I've chosen to open save. You can save it as a DAT file because that's what we use at MLC to upload to Verso. And so I guess that's a good thing about doing it on the web browser is that you can look up old bibliographic records. So if you want to double check to see, wait a moment, how did I catalog this one book that I cataloged in like late June? You can go there and then download that specific late June cataloging record. Whereas with the Connection Client computer program, because it overwrites the same record, you basically have to go to the system to check, okay, how did that book get uploaded to our specific library system? All right, so I don't want to keep you all for 10 bajillion years, so I'm going to show you at least how to get started on cataloging a original record. Because, oh, you see when I clicked out of the OCLC window, a little logging off window popped up. So like I said, I'm going to show you how to at least get started on cataloging an original record. And then I'm also going to show you my favorite trick for like book club kits and story walks and things like that. So Let me maximize this file log on. Yes, I am there. So I'll show you my favorite trick for book club kits and story walks and things like that first. My favorite trick for that, we're going to pull up Madhouse again, because occasionally with cataloging systems, if two records share the same ISBN, okay, then at least with MLC and with Verso, if two records share the same ISBN, then Verso will just be like, oh, cool, they're the same thing, and append them on top of each other, which is not very useful if you have a physical library copy of Madhouse at the End of the Earth, but you also have like a book club kit or a story walk or another, like a super special copy that you want to keep different from your main copy. So for that, I use one of my favorite things. Let's see, where does it live? If I find where it lives again, it's Derive Records. Charlie, if you remember where Derive Records lives, please. Here we go, Derive. Awesome. So it's under Edit, Derive, New Master Record. And then that basically copy pastes pretty much everything except for some information that you will find out which information it does not copy paste over once you validate it and it freaks out. It copy pastes some information over to a new catalog entry. So for example, I can then edit this one to book club kit or edit it to like story walk. And then it won't essentially shove it on top of the first one, which is very useful because it spent me a lot of time and a lot of trouble when I was staring at some of our book club kits going, why are you being so weird? Okay, so doing a new catalog entry. Let me just get rid of these bad boys. So they're cataloging, create, single record, and then it will pull up a lot of different options. So for example, for this one, we have this lovely little book that we have cataloged already, but I'm sure someone had to catalog for the first time because it is Writing the Store About by McKenna Andrews, who's a little 9-year-old girl who won a writing competition. So this is the sort of thing that you will probably have to create a new catalog entry for, because even though it has an ISBN, I don't think that there's going to be much out there for McKenna and her wonderful book about dolphins. So that would be cataloging, create, single record, books, and then it pulls up a completely blank record. And this looks terrifying right off the start. I know that, I admit that, but then that's when you go back to the OCLC website, to this support and training, because then you can click on some of these fields. And like, for example, the 1XX fields, that's 100. Okay, what's that main field? Main entry, personal name. Okay, that would be the authors. And so when I go back to here, let's see, 100, I can just enter that and when you're doing new cataloging fields, when you're doing new catalog entries, it's a lot of copying what you already know. Like, for example, if our library already had a book like about dolphins, or a book Writing the Storm Out is about dolphins and Hurricane Katrina. So if our library also had a book about Hurricane Katrina or about dolphins, I could look up that book in our library system and see how other people had cataloged it, so that I could replicate things like these subject headings so that it can make things easier for everybody else. So, okay, I did a search for dolphins. I found a book called The Wonder of Dolphins. We're going to click on that. And this is the trick where if your library system uses Verso, you pull up, there's a catalog entry, that's nice, but if you keep scrolling down, it shows you the MARC display. And this right here, this is basically what you see in a catalog entry. This is what we were doing earlier. It just does not have the little double daggers to mark some of the fields. So for example, I see that this is 650 field, which I'm going to quickly double check what a 650 field is by clicking 6xx fields, 650. Okay, that's a topical term for subject added entry. So for example, with this, I can just basically copy paste this thing about dolphins juvenile literature, making sure that I can spot, okay, it's 650, the indicators are 0 and then nothing. I can copy paste that into our good buddy for Riding the Storm Out. And then I do have to do a little editing. So with that, and just highlight this little double daggers, copy it, and then paste. Make sure that everything's not smushed up against each other. And bam, there we go. I have a subject field for this book about dolphins, and I didn't have to look that up myself. It is working smarter, not harder. I found a book that already has something to do with what this current book is, and then was able to pull from that. I am still going to have to do a lot more in order to fully catalog this book, because I don't know what type of pages there are. I don't know where the publishing company was based out of, but anything that you can do when you're doing original cataloging to lessen your load, you should do it, because original cataloging is a lot of work. And apologies in advance to all you librarians who are cataloging the cool rocks of the world out there, but it's a lot of work. And it's rewarding at the end, because after you've put in all that work, after you've looked up where the heck this book was published, after you quickly count some of the pages in the book to see that you have 30 unnumbered pages, you look at that entry and then you go, hey, this is all me. I have made this book, I have made this entry, I have put it out there in the world, and then other people can only build up on this entry and make it better themselves when other librarians get copy of Writing the Store About written by 9-year-old McKenna Andrews. So yes, that is the end of my presentation. Again, yeah, sleuthing your library cataloging. Yes, it is work smarter, not harder. If you can copy off of something you already have, if you have found a catalog entry that vaguely relates to what you're doing, then take advantage of that, buddy, because original cataloging is hard work. It is time-consuming work. It will take longer than you expect, because you're gonna get a book and you'll go, okay, surely I will find information about this publishing company somewhere. And then you spend 15 minutes trying to find information about the dang publishing company and you can't find anything. So you settle for a place of publication not identified because you need to go on lunch soon and it's driving you up the wall. But it's hard work, but it's fun work. And it's fun work if you're the type of person who thinks it's fun work to begin with. And yeah, that's it. As always, email me if you have any questions. Email me if something is weird. Let me go ahead and drop the OCLC bib formats link in the chat, because like I said, it is your best friend. I find that it is a very useful website if you don't know what the heck something is, or if you pull up a validate message and it doesn't know what something is. It is very useful it tells you what this thing is and how it should look. And like, if you're question shy, or like I said, if it comes to you 5 hours later in the shower, then please email me at kgill@mlc.lib.ms.us, because I could go on about cataloging for 10 bajillion hours, but it is a subject that you have to have a certain type of brain in order to fully appreciate, because the cataloging librarians are always in demand for a reason.
Well, thank you very much, Katie. This was like really good. I haven't had cataloging since, grad school. So I relearned some stuff. I'm going to drop the survey evaluation for this training in the chat, but I'm also going to email it out in case anybody misses it in here. And, like Katie said, if you have any questions, just email her. If you, for some reason, cannot remember her email address, you can email me. One way or another, we'll get you hooked up. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.